I could not be fully convinced, still believing that the whole experience was generated from my unconscious mind. Whenever I conducted the experience further, the sound recordings declared unusually different wisdom. They were unusual because I had no knowledge of the information shared, for I knew I had never been interested in knowing, nor had any cause to know the subjects under observation. Nor did I have the need to study them from books borrowed at the time. Our unconscious minds are capable of absorbing information in brief seconds and storing it, while we are unaware. When there is need for that wisdom to be made known, it will be made available. One wonders what else we are going to discover about our fantastic mind. If the experience was a pre-recorded genetic element, it would also make sense if we accepted the continuity of life through the ages of being born again several times in the past. Are we perhaps recycled continually throughout eternity? Throughout the years, I became aware of other sensitives and learned a little about their mediumistic activities with alleged higher intelligences. Although not fully convinced, I still wonder if what I have experimented on my own self could be compared with their experiences. Some of those people have written books about their activities with the other side, and when one open-mindedly reads their literature, one discovers well-defined logic in them. This is one of the reasons why I was interested in recording everything and analyzing what is transferred. If we could become aware of a verifiable source, we could truly rejoice. Merva began asking me to take over her group, as she felt very tired and believed that I was heaven-sent. Obviously, what she had started was helping people adhering to the group, and they were feeling good about the experience, even finding some consolation for their possible personal traumas. But I was not interested in taking over. I felt the need to explain myself fully, while Merva and the others showed the utmost respect towards me. I preferred to encourage them to discover their hidden talents and use their own imagination in finding their real selves in the real world, thus becoming happier and healthier individuals. This could be considered a great achievement without trying to change anybody, but rather helping them to help themselves to a healthier life. Nevertheless, I could not lead people into believing in what I could not fully understand or believe. Since I would never put myself on a pedestal to be worshipped, as mentioned, I made a suggestion to them to accept me as a special friend from afar, willing to share some of the treasures he found whilst walking his pathway. It meant telling them things about my discoveries, but I was unwilling to tell them about it being an experiment for now, and yet, if they so chose, they could consider it as being one. When my discovery is discovered to be helping them feel better, encouraging them to make but positive changes to their thinking, and therefore enjoy their lives, their friendships, their families, and the world that surrounds them, the numbers of people frequenting those get-togethers increased. I never enjoy bragging about myself, however, my talks became more enjoyable and fun than before. Some even kept suggesting that I should write books on these subjects for future reference. I continued to attend the gatherings for those who were willing to listen and discover. I was the most rejected of my ex-wife, her witness associates, and my alleged children. Yet I was a truly accepted and treasured friend for others. One's trash became others' treasure. Several of the guests regularly attending my talks either directly or indirectly suggested that Merva should step down from her throne. But it would be very unfair, for she had started that group initially, after being rejected from another spiritual development group due to her own reasons, or being somewhat different with her opinions, which I was not familiar with and did not wish to know. It was interesting to see how I was originally involved with Merva's group, after being introduced to them by members of the WA-UFO-IC research group, who were keen to know the real truth about UFOs, alien visitors from other places, and their individual experiences. They all claimed to have discovered some form of communication through those channeling sessions at Merva's group. Some of them were so convinced that they were literally conversing with other intelligences from afar. Allegedly, after such gatherings and communication with others from galactic space via Merva's mediumship, they had either seen unidentified lights in Perth's skies or encountered them while driving. It was going to be an extraordinary experiment on my part. Some were very critical of Merva, believing she was engaged in black art. It was extremely judgmental, as I did not discover anything like that, even after my not-so-obvious psychoanalysis of her. On the other hand, some declared that they sensed something almost Christ-like about me. Perhaps due to being gentle with everyone, but not in extremes. I prefer to be kind to everyone, for I always like to see people smile and be happy, although I have often been laughed at or criticized for being me by a group of automatons enslaved to a cult. Ironically, some of my experiments and behavior were taken by a few, for instance my ex-partner and her associates, as being opposite to what I stood for. Everything unusual and unexplainable was considered by them as something to be feared, therefore dark and sinister. I did not dare mention anything to any of them, for they preferred not to listen to worthless chatter, as they put it, and if I attempted to quote from Magda's favorite book, the Bible, she always snapped at me, saying, "How dare you speak of God's word? You are a devil worshipper." She certainly represented her spiritual brothers and sisters in the minutest detail. They chose to believe that they knew all about the truth, but closed their minds completely. No, I was never a devil worshipper, nor believed in the existence of their God. On the other hand, there was so much more to be known about real human beings and their wonderful minds. Remember, Jehovah's Witnesses are exactly what they believe themselves to be, not necessarily belonging to the human race. Speaking of Jehovah's Witnesses, after many years of associating with them, I can easily say without any prejudice and through systematic observation that there exists persistent evidence of their limited thought processes and teachings. They regard supposed spirit communication and related activities, such as being inspired, sinful after alleged biblical advice, and therefore witness elders consider their minds remaining pure. But the reality is different. They do not allow progressive thinking, therefore education of any kind outside their convictions is seen as a great sin against their God. Thus my desperate need to question them about what is really contained within their minds. We discover that the witnesses are always one-track minded in regard to all scientific research and discoveries. New Age and spiritual thinking and communication as possession by demons who apparently worship Satan, the devil. They never entertain the idea of spirit communication because, as far as they are concerned, all spirits are demons who channel everything evil to their audiences. We need to ask them to explain that if the Bible is inspired or channeled from God and his angels, could it not also be considered as dependent on demonic activity if all spirit communication is demonic and we should avoid it? Jehovah's Witnesses progressively close their minds by never allowing any form of education for fear of being guided by the demons. All progressive thought, inventiveness, and imagination are regarded in the same light. This is the most fanatical and superstitious characteristic of the witnesses, which is made manifest in their lifestyle. Their children are inflicted with the same darkness from a very young age, rendering them unwilling to educate themselves, only remaining within the limited wisdom and teachings of uninspired men, who they adore as if they are the spokesman of God Almighty, thus replacing Jesus, the Redeemer. I will cautiously declare that the witnesses live only in fear, because they let the real demons play with their minds, thereby stopping all inspiration and keeping them in darkness. This is the utmost evil. The witnesses are victims of this ill, and the blood of every single witness is in the hands of a bunch of uninspired men of their governing body. Every single individual witness is sacrificed by their dedication to a non-existent goal, for God, Jehovah, cannot be the one who stops them from progressing in education and wisdom. God does not lead anyone into darkness, no matter how they may try to prove this thought to be wrong. Perhaps the witness elders and teachers should start thinking. I will again emphasize that anything which leads to darkness is evil and cannot be from God. The devil and his demons are the ones inflicting them with fear of discovery and progressive thinking by setting various scenarios for them to avoid education. They are so hypnotized that when they see the fruit of knowledge, they are immediately conditioned to run away from it. As long as they are kept in the dark, they can never be free and are easily controlled by the demons inspiring their governing body. Therefore, Jehovah's Witnesses are like children running around the mulberry bush, repeatedly doing the same things, never permitting themselves to think. They seem to be happy in the belief that they are doing fine. It is time to wake up. I often ask myself this question in regard to Christ, walking again amongst men. Would they truly recognize and follow him, or would they reject him as an odd and an evil person? Let us be honest with ourselves. When you meet a man who speaks a different language to yours, or better still, a man who is heavily accented, how would you react? Your very first impressions of him would most likely be that he is not cognizant about the sophisticated lifestyle you lead, perhaps an unintelligent and uncultured individual, not deserving your attention, for he cannot express himself as you do. Can you imagine how many talented, well-educated, and cultured people have been ignored and segregated within society? This trend can be seen everywhere around you, on every continent in the world. No matter what background, social upbringing, nationality, race or belief system people may belong to, so many of them are ever ready to condemn and even persecute anybody who is different. Thankfully, we have developed techniques to interpret foreign languages and communicate with others from all around the world. Today, by utilizing internationally spoken English, we can at least discover the existence of great minds, great arts, and inventions, and share them. But the original trend of many in rejecting one another due to lingual barriers, social standing, race or religion still remains. When people can overcome their differences and accept one another, they can amicably communicate, and by doing so they may start understanding each other. If you belong to a certain religious ideal, believing in a supreme deity, you are very likely to ask the question about why a great God, the creator of everything, confused the language of people in the first place so that they could not continue with their endeavors. Remember, the Bible declares that God, being so absolutely perfect, could only have created his prime creation, man, perfectly. Perfect humans cannot therefore do imperfect things, and somehow anger their God. Anger, jealousies, and separations cannot belong to the characteristics of a perfect God. Therefore, we are urged to think again why Christ advised his followers to love all others, no matter what their background or status. Why do you think that the Hebrew nation, God's first chosen, emphasize honoring oneself and one's parents, unity and brotherly love? Why is Islam said to preach peace? Maybe there is a different explanation for this. I believe almost all man's religions and belief systems contain gems everybody can benefit from. The idea we are better than the other should be replaced with we can work together and make our world a better place for all. However, as long as cults, like the witnesses amongst others, believe they are perfect like their God exist with their despicable attitudes towards humanity, the entire world can only regress, not advance into a beautiful future. I prefer peace, love, and understanding, not separations and hurt to others, because I do not belong to or support the characteristics of Jehovah's Witnesses and the like. I am also one of the completely and wrongly judged people in the world. Why? It is because I am different. I sound different, I am slightly accented, and I am always kind to others. I accept people as they are, and my love is unconditional. In return, I expect nothing, not any reward other than beautiful smiles on people's faces. I have never sought fame and glory or financial gain by being the way I am. There are better ways to gain fame and buying power. Honest work is one of them. Yes, I am different. Whether I am accepted by others or not does not bother me. Others can only accept me as I am, for that is my nature. I cannot change what I am, otherwise I cannot really be me. But my ex-wife and her witness bosses tried to change me into a faithful slave, as they do with others in the name of their governing body. Remember, for every action there is a reaction. Therefore, the original Buddhist philosophy, which Jesus also promoted, has become my motto throughout the years. Do unto others as you would like it to be done unto you. Whatever one shouts at a mountain echoes back. When I undertook the study of psychology, I knew it would be a lifelong commitment. It really becomes one's lifetime companion. It has shown me the art of living positively. It is an art because it shows the beauty and realism of life if we allow it to be part of our daily existence. The art of living is getting to know ourselves. It is living in harmony with ourselves and others, and knowing that there are great possibilities in our nature. Self-awareness, acceptance, and assertion are vital concepts in this understanding. Being self-aware means understanding our emotions, aspirations, capabilities, behaviors, values, and our own minds. What we discover as being ourselves leads us to comprehend what we may have overlooked. It is not fanatical, and we do not need to think about it 24 hours a day, but it is a perfect objective towards the realization of what we have been exposed to for a very long time in our past. Through self-awareness, we discover our readiness to experience rather than discard the reality of being in the moment. We need to identify our emotions and experience them. Remember also that self-acceptance is not self-deception. Self-assertion means honoring one's personal needs, one's own assumptions, and one's own values. Success means to transform one's self into action. On the other hand, giving others' feelings priority while being aware of their needs and rights is not self-sacrifice, but objectivity. Do Jehovah's Witnesses respect this principle? Self-awareness can only start by learning to be more responsive to our own feelings, moods, and emotions, which we may have been forced to block, the same way as fanatical belief systems foster. This awareness can only be felt by observing without interfering. No matter how one feels about an experiment, an event, or anything else, when not categorized, it becomes a better experience, which can be studied more objectively, for it is far better for self-healing. There are a number of psychologists and philosophers promoting this understanding, and I also believe that when we become aware of our unwanted feelings, they begin to fade. I have personally been affected by such emotions in the past, and the only way to remove them from my consciousness was to become more aware of their existence, knowing deep down that they were not worth worrying about. Here is an experiment you can try by yourself as recommended in a literature which one must read. Take a deep breath and close your eyes without paying any attention to details of your inner experience, no matter what it may be, not criticizing, without self-condemnation, and without any assumptions, and you will be surprised how it awakens some of your obscure emotions which had not been recalled for a long time. While developing our self-awareness, we become more cognizant of the fact that we know a lot more than what we think. This is why nobody should interfere with our awareness, dulling us into a deep sleep so that we can be controlled. We therefore need to be aware of the cultist dictums we may be forced to listen to. I recommend that people start their day with laughter and surround themselves with happy colors, same as those writers who have studied this issue for a long time. And their day will be happy and colorful. Experience it and discover how happy you can be. I have often spoken about the ultimate questions of life many of us are so very curious to understand. One in particular concerns everybody. Are we here just for the moment, and in the next moment in time, we simply vanish? If so, why cannot the unique expression of consciousness, which yearns to live forever and never cease existing, accept oblivion as the ultimate goal for our next destination? Why is it so that every individual is desirous to live and make it worthwhile to experience life, never wanting to worry about the ending of all things? Are we only living just to die? If so, would it not be better never to be alive and experience what living is? Do we survive the inevitable? It is perfectly normal and very natural to think this way. What about the animal kingdom? Do they feel the same way as we practical humans do? And do they also worry the same way we do when the end comes? At least in theory, animals have similar feelings and are capable of knowing when departure is imminent. In the human world, we popularly call it fear of the unknown. But how do animals score it? Are we perhaps simply primitive shells? Like with everything living, there needs to be something we know very little of and is somewhat electromagnetic in nature, which in varying degrees and formations animate living organisms according to need and environment, and every one of us, including animals, seem to tap into it. I consider it to be living in reality and being alive in the universe, although unknown to us, and certainly more than we can imagine, while physically alive. Perhaps we can make it easier for ourselves to understand if we can equate it with life force. Our minds seem to be so limited that we cannot detect its size, let alone its color. Even our brains, despite being truly magnificent in many ways, are incapable of hearing all sounds and sensing all frequencies of light, therefore rendering us unable to see beyond the dark recesses of the universe. We still have no idea how life works, and even in our wildest dreams are only scratching the surface. Could we perhaps describe life force as the real essence of being? As considered earlier, there are too many unknowns, and it would be foolish to think in terms of only black and white. I say it is better still not to hope too much of one thing or outcome, for we will eventually learn the reality of things when the time comes. Then we will know what happens to us, as with others who have gone before us, just the same as the animal kingdom. When we take Plato's wisdom into account, we need to consider this. Oftentimes it is easy to understand the dilemma of a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy is when men are afraid of the light. Many seem to grope in the dark while imagining they are living in the light. Some open-mindedness could take us into the heights where we can at least sense the existence of light. Alas, throughout the centuries, religious dogma has kept almost every individual in the dark, inside a dirty little box, with a tightly closed lid on the top. Like an amoeba, which could not move in any direction, most of humanity has also been living until some spark of light, perhaps streaming from a tiny pinhole somewhere within the dark prison cell, manifests. While frequenting Merva's group, I discovered some people who desperately needed psychologically viable assistance, and not psychic endeavors, who could not witness any improvement within their personal outlook on life, even after a considerable period of attendance. That may have been due to the repeated advice given and repeated scenarios created unendingly, but perhaps there was a need for that. When people become severely depressed and suicidal, they need to seek the help of appropriate professionals, the same as when someone needs the assistance of an electrician. He or she would not ask the help of a plumber. According to known facts, the witnesses would never agree with this concept, for when it comes to certain types of medical treatment, as with psychiatric assistance, they would prefer to ask the help of their dedicated elders instead, believing they are spirit-guided. As far as my ex-wife and associates were concerned, I was guided by evil spirits. However, I believe that through my contributions in Merva's group, we were able to create variety and some color while making the audience think, assisting them to make the right choices when seeking help to overcome their dilemmas, but never attempting to stop them being interested in what they were trying to discover in those gatherings. Without making it obvious, my aim was to assist them to ask questions to find solutions to their problems and disillusions within their lives. Their happiness was important in their own personal space. In other words, there was need to encourage them to conduct their own research. Remember the wise words? Seek, and you shall find. They were undeniably content with what they were experiencing, but I felt the need to invent new ways for them to understand that any change in their lives they desired to implement had to come from within their own wonderful minds, for I could not facilitate it by myself as I might have been expected to do, and it was not part of my personal principles. In truth, I was fearful to start yet another cult, for the world was full of them. I was there as their friend, and would feel happy if they could benefit from my input, knowing I had done something good. But if it did not provide them with any benefit, and they did not want to continue with my help, that would also be perfectly all right. The group was happy to accommodate me, and I was excited, as they were keenly interested. However, some people discreetly told me that Merva might be a little disturbed about it, for she needed much attention, although I did not discover it to be the case. She was very happy to leave it all to me. But I could not accept it, for this group was initially created by her. My association could be broken at any time, as I had other interests which would eventually take me somewhere else, although they would love to keep me there. I felt that many of them were content with the experience and happy that I was not going to stop her in any way. There was a time when she suggested that we could channel to each other's guardian angels. That was going to be a challenge for anyone, especially in my case, feeling forced into a role play similar to a theatrical performance on stage. Personally, I could not promote a pretend channeling of the energies of an unfamiliar life stream or a consciousness which may or may not have existed. For her part, Merva was totally convinced that Suren's guardian angels would be able to take control of her entire physicality and speak through her. According to this understanding, apparently it would be possible for such great consciousness to use an individual's voice. The idea was certainly very fascinating, but the reality sounded different. There were no viable or scientific tests conducted in this field, as far as I knew. Besides, under normal circumstances, one tends to question the scenario where one consciousness controls another consciousness, one form of physical consciousness controlling yet another physical being. Is it really possible? Maybe we need to search into historic facts to find whether any research had been conducted and what results had been obtained before assuming anything. There are a few interesting studies being conducted on the human brain and its capabilities in regard to brainwave pattern generation, broadcast, and reception. But I prefer to leave it to the scientific community for now. When examining available data, we discover experiments relating to the reality of telepathy and hypnosis. In one experiment, a subject was hypnotized, and another was given spicy food items. The hypnotized subject was telepathically informed about these tastes and correctly vocally identified them. In my case, conducting this kind of experiment could present difficulties on ethical grounds, and therefore I preferred to do it in a more controlled environment. I decided to lightly hypnotize myself and experiment in tuning into telepathic input, which was to be vocalized and recorded. Maybe Merva's unconscious or conscious thoughts could be telepathically transmitted. However, I was not absolutely certain if my thoughts would influence her to utter the words I was thinking, and wondered what kind of mind transference would be established. If we could record the event, the result could be analyzed and verified against personally known factors. For instance, could any of my thoughts, which she most certainly had no previous knowledge of, become audible through her? And similarly, what she thought transferred telepathically into my mind. If successful, we could conduct further tests. This could lead to new discoveries about the workings of the human mind. I took this opportunity, and the recordings presented similarities to what I discreetly thought all along. As might be expected, there was no exactitude. However, Merva claimed that I had relayed all her thoughts as they were, and in addition to this, she recognized her guardian angel's known characteristics, just like those who had been attending the gatherings long before my arrival did. She repeatedly said it was uncanny and unbelievable. For her, it was the proof she was seeking. For her audience, it was a most exciting event. One of the members asked me if I could detect their innermost thoughts, and another answered her on behalf of me, saying it was an absolute certainty on my part that I could. I found the idea amusing, while trying not to show it, and told them that it would be a most undesirable situation. Although telepathy under hypnosis has proved to be true, certain disciplines would be required. As humans, we do it on a daily basis, without the need for hypnosis. Consider the times when you were thinking about someone you knew, and that someone called you on the telephone or was at your door shortly afterwards. In this instance, either your thoughts were detected by the other, or you have detected your friends. Although this may sound highly unlikely, it happens all the time. But does it also likewise happen with other intelligences throughout the universe? Is it therefore possible to detect the thoughts of others in different existences from within the cosmos? What about those different dimensions, even from within our own world? Can we feel what they are thinking right now? If this can be scientifically verified, especially after thorough research and study, imagine what it would mean for the human species living on this wonderful world. However, having psychoanalyzed the person in question, it would be easy for someone like me to tell her what she wanted to hear, even if I was semi-conscious or under mild self-hypnosis. You might think of me being overly self-critical, but I am not. Think about the close emotional and mental ties between mothers and their toddlers, between brothers, sisters, lovers, and close friends. Is it impossible? If this is true, how could it be impossible between humans and those of different dimensions? Imagine having an electronic device or a radio you can use for corresponding with others in different dimensions. There are people working on such inventions right now. Here is a classic question. Do we survive the inevitable and live on in a different dimension, wherefrom we can communicate with our loved ones? On the other hand, I remember my mother saying to me that her two beloved sons had many similarities to each other, as if they were identical twins, born at the same time. Years later, we discovered that our lives and life experiences have been lived along parallel lines. Was that the real reason behind our ability to feel each other's thoughts? If thoughts can be sent out and be detected by other minds, then there is nothing to stop thoughts influencing other elements of life on molecular levels. This has been proven by repetitious experimentation using water molecules. What are we then doing with our thoughts? Look around you and consider all the conflicts and negativity bathing the world. Then think about the teachings of known secular systems, with their fanatical viewpoints about everything and everybody. How many people do you see talking positively about their own world, their work, family, and the little circles they have created? Listen to your daily news and consider what your world is surrounded with. If people would only forget their differences for a moment, and everyone dedicate that moment to one positive outcome, thinking of peace and unity, what could be achieved? This has been tested in small ways in a meditative state just by thinking positively, and, as with Washington, D.C. reports, furnished by the FBI confirmed at least a 25% drop in the crime rate in that city. Such a meditation was conducted worldwide over the Internet some time ago. Thoughts are things. I know for a fact that by surrounding ourselves with beautiful thoughts on a daily basis, we tend to lead happier and carefree lives. Think also about those people who only suffer, sometimes without any reason, and you may be able to discover their melancholic and negative thought patterns they are subjected to from exterior sources on a daily basis. Perhaps we need to make a very definite decision to have better and positive thoughts, considering healthier lifestyles and dwelling on a more peaceful world, not on inventing how best to destroy our brothers just because they are following a different pathway. Do I hear you say it is very difficult? All peace starts within each individual. Be at peace with yourself, and you will generate peace. Instead of condemning others, perhaps the best action for humanity is to live in peace, without separatism. If one desires to be creative, there cannot be any negative interference or any thought which is harmful to the process. Such a process would not work purely on any organizational or religious system. It needs to be worldwide and universal, involving all humanity without any separation, without claiming our method is better than yours, or even considering a great deity having only chosen our way to be correct. It needs to be worldwide. When in Perth presenting radio, attending WAUFO-IC, WOFOIC Research, and Merva's group reasonably regularly, a large number of people showed great interest in my teachings. One such person was Elizabeth of Polish descent. She had 3 young boys without their father, as he had left the family and was living in London. She could not understand why he had done so without any reason, but according to her sons, he left because of their mother's strange beliefs. Interestingly, she was keenly interested in teachings of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, attending every meeting and taking their semi-religious books extremely seriously. She had brothers in Sydney who were more than willing to take care of her children, but she preferred them to live spiritually as she was. When she met me at Merva's group, apparently after hearing about my fame, she felt the need to meet that highly spiritual man. I had a cup of coffee with her and listened to her multifaceted stories. She told me all about her former partners. Upon her discovery of me, she thought she was falling in love without realizing why. She believed that if I felt the same way towards her, her boys would have a father again who would truly care for their spiritual needs. What about their other important needs, I wondered, education and welfare? However, I was not interested in any affair, let alone remarrying and having instant children. I did not feel comfortable with the idea. She was also obsessed with another long-haired gentleman who smoked heavily and was apparently often drunk. Yet he used to have his own group, which met regularly, and he supposedly channeled to Jesus or other well-known religious figures. He was bringing good news from them to his group, which worshipped him. There were complaints about him taking advantage of younger ladies, and he did not show much interest in Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth always took sides with him, adoringly claiming that he was falsely judged. She invited me to one of his gatherings where I did not find anything new, other than him talking downgradingly about anything and everything the world offered. There were others, like Elizabeth, who thought of him as being the second coming of Christ. I felt unwanted there, as if I was likely to become the competition, and, following my feelings, I happily left them, never to return. Elizabeth kept inviting and meeting me over cups of coffee. She started frequenting my studio, occasionally visiting me after hours, and usually, when I was not home, putting fresh fruits in a plastic bag in front of the door. Although taking it as a nice gesture at first, I wondered why she saw it fit to do something like that. Was it perhaps a token of her secret care? Could it perhaps be a form of sacrificial offering to a guru? I did not have an answer other than theorizing that perhaps it was for a charitable purpose. Her sons, who were keenly interested in playing soccer and often involved in outdoor activities, clearly missed their father. Her eldest was beginning to show signs of rebellion against her, wanting to go to his father, and understandably, she was very concerned. She thought he needed a role model immediately. Some evenings she used to take them to the radio station, unannounced, where I presented a variety of programs. Sometimes she came on her own, still hoping to develop a relationship. Another interesting observation was that when she met me in the very first time, at Merva's gathering, she thought I had to be closely related to the famed Indian holy man, namely Sai Baba, who had a worldwide following. Elizabeth even told me with some certainty that I was an aspect of Sai. On the other hand, Elizabeth Clare Prophet was apparently presenting herself as the reincarnation of Guinevere, strictly following the footsteps of Saint Germain, who turned lead into gold. There was a regular meeting near my unit in Victoria Park, but I did not have a chance to attend it. From outside one could hear much chanting, and we were told they had a closed circle. However, if I visited them, even when uninvited, they would most certainly open their home to me. Elizabeth showed great interest and, strangely, a very unusual devotional respect towards me. After her discovery, she thought she had finally found genuine love, a wonderful partner, and a possible caring father in me. How sad it was to see those people accepting me and feeling good in my presence, and yet my own family I totally adored considered me evil and rejected me. I had no idea where my first true love was, who had turned bitter against me due to being conditioned religiously, and abducting our children, unadvised given, by her close associates. I learned a long time later that she was living in Perth, but at the time of my staying there, I had no idea about this. Maybe the universe directed my footsteps into that part of the world for a reason, without me being aware of the circumstances. Some would probably consider it as divine providence, or perhaps the heavens above seeing fit. There was something in the air no one could properly define, but as with everything else, it would come to light. Perhaps there was something called divine justice after all. Maybe within this grand illusion we call life, the universe had a few new plans for me. I was certainly not prepared for another marital status, and even the word marriage scared me. Besides, I needed to recover from my own traumas, needing some time to heal. But Elizabeth might have been thinking otherwise, and so she has seen fit to visit me often. I prefer to remain as friends and not further the situation. For her part, she was determined to try all kinds of tactics, often visiting me at home, just popping in with an excuse that she happened to be around, the boys wanting to see me, or she was visiting another friend. There were times when she noticed the flickering lights streaming from my monitors from outside and interpreted it as being dependent on alien technology. After seeing so many unusual-looking electronic devices at my place and noticing unusual phenomena in the sky above my dwelling, even when I was not home, she told me I could only be from distances far outside this world. She had involved her young sons and some of her other friends to think in similar ways in her assessments of my person. She and her boys often questioned me about these issues, but I refrained from talking about them. Some things need not be spoken. It was long after the aerial phenomenon observed by several people, unknown to each other, from many corners of the city and nearby suburbs, and, as you may remember me telling you after my report of what I observed from my balcony, had been featured in the daily papers, and an interview with me was published in magazines. Elizabeth was convinced that I had a galactic, indeed an extraterrestrial connection. Again, it was a subject under scrutiny, and I did not want to dwell on this either. She told me about the photos of me and a drawing I made of an alien girl, printed in full color in one of the magazines, which she had framed and were hanging on her walls. Occasionally she brought her sons at weekends to stay with me in the spare rooms, and often exclaimed she trusted me more than anybody else in the world. That was nice to hear, but forcing her way into my life was a little extreme. Sadly, my own family would never consider me as being trustworthy and honest, because I was not in their truth, and was disfellowshipped. I suppose their own treacherous actions, multiple lies, and covering up of abuse amongst the witnesses was never considered. Merva's young relatives had a very sick child with a horrible medical condition. The poor child's entire stomach was coming out of her mouth, and after a long period of suffering, medical science could not help her. After her passing, the young parents needed psychological help and some words of comfort. I hope I have been able to do that, for I knew they were extremely grateful. I was also happy to oblige so that they could cope with their tragic loss. I compiled some of their infant's handiwork into a piece of art for them. I was happy having started my own business in a shopping arcade in Victoria Park. The shop had been empty for a very long time, and the owners were looking for a tenant who would accept a rent-free period. I thought it was a nice idea to start a small gallery of my own paintings and feature local artists' works, while also selling art materials for budding artists as well as local schools. Having discovered this, Merva told me she had spoken to her brother, who was a keen yachtsman, often sailing around Perth, and was more than willing to contribute towards my business. However, not knowing anything about her brother, I could not accept their generous offer. I knew whatever resources I had would be more than sufficient for the while, yet they insisted on helping me with at least $1,000. I explained to them that I was uncomfortable with the additional burden of paying it back at a certain period of time, and it possibly being dependent on future uncertainties, and I did not desire to be seen as a cheat or as someone not honoring his obligations. He told me in the presence of Merva and others that if I so wished to pay it back whenever it was more favorable, I could do so, otherwise he would love to offer it as a gift. I hoped I did not hear him wrongly. This appeared to me like an omen of good things beginning to happen, and I intended to pay it back in the near future. When I entered that shop for the very first time, I knew there was great need to create an attractive but unusual decor. I painted a lovely divider using stretched canvas. Having obtained bales of hay, which needed fire-retardant treatment, and a couple of large wine barrels for my special decoration, I stocked the shop and gallery with a variety of art materials and a collection of my own paintings and drawings, as well as artwork from local school children. Then I extensively advertised the business in the daily papers, local newspapers, and industry calendars. Some shop owners wanted my help with their signwriting needs. A while later, I started television advertising. I imagined that if my children were able to see my advertisements and recognize my whereabouts, they would hopefully attempt to see me. Then I laughed about my empty imaginings, for at the time I did not know where they had been abducted to. What made me imagine about my children living in this part of the world, I cannot say. Probably it was nothing more than just wishful thinking. As mentioned, years later I was to learn that they were living in Perth, and obviously some intelligence exterior to mine was trying to correspond with me about the injustices I, as well as my children, had been subjected to. That something beyond normal comprehension led me to the West in the first place, but I did not realize it. No matter what the real evildoers were trying to achieve by destroying my family and my very special bond with my partner, it could never stop them discovering my whereabouts after I moved closer to where they lived. And perhaps the cries of the unnamed lad I was hearing for a long while within my imagination were not empty dreaming, void of substance after all. I heard that my son had once visited me in the shop, but I could not be sure or believe it because if he dropped in, he would introduce himself or say something to me, unless he was under strict instructions never to approach me. Furthermore, not expecting any surprises like that, I probably would not be able to recognize him. Maybe this was bound to remain wishful thinking on my part. In truth, I did not expect any of them to visit me. I did not expect a good word or smile from any of them any more. Many years later, when Birgit approached me as an adult, while I was having a cup of coffee at Meyer Melbourne, she informed me that they were living in Perth, and their mother was cutting out certain advertisements and articles from the newspapers, probably removing my advertisements to hide my whereabouts. At one stage, Birgit told me what her mother said. "Oh my God, your father has found us." Was it also recommended by the witnesses? For they most certainly followed the dictates of their God. If that was so, one needs to ask who, in truth, the real evil was. At the time, I thought that at least Claude would come visiting me if he was living in Perth. I even thought that, knowing how naive their mother was, she might have taken them to Germany. Then again, if she had discovered my existence, she would never allow them to come closer to me, and therefore it would be better for me to put this thought aside. After all, as we have already discovered, she changed her and the children's family names so that I could never find them again, and this way she could completely wipe me off from their lives. Is that not pure evil? In truth, I was utterly rejected by the real evildoers. The Jehovah's Witness organization has been a most evil one since their beginnings in the 1870s. Theirs were despicable policies guiding their lives through the organization, showing no mercy for those supposedly questioning the spirit, while all other crimes are swept under the carpet. They shun and break families if any member thereof leaves their heartless society. This is not said discriminately, but in absolute honesty. I was not surprised when I discovered that their governing body finally admitted to being no longer inspired by Jehovah God and that they are fallible. Then we, the allegedly rejected of God, after their judicial committee's decision of disfellowshipment of so-called sinners, ask them, "Where is your truth? For everything you were preaching, all your principles and lifestyles are erroneous, for you are, by your own admission, subject to error." Cutting off a family member in the name of religion is unethical and unrighteous, originating not from God, but the devil. Encouraging the children to be baptized at a very young age when they cannot think like an adult is equally incorrect, for even Jesus was not baptized until the age of 30. When they became adults, after not having a real childhood and teenage years, it is not surprising for them to rebel and leave the organization they had been enslaved to. This is also the reason why mental breakdowns and suicides are prevalent amongst the shunned and rejected. There are two specific questions the witnesses ask after their baptism talk, and if you notice, they are deliberate. On the basis of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, have you repented of your sins and dedicated yourself to Jehovah to do His will? And do you understand that your dedication and baptism identify you as one of Jehovah's Witnesses in association with God's Spirit-directed organization? Imagine asking an 8-year-old and expecting an answer to these questions. The word Jehovah does not stand for Jesus Christ, but the alleged organization of God, and the second question refers to the said organization, but not Jesus as He told them. Read Matthew 28, chapters 19 and 20, and you will discover how Jesus told His disciples what to do in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In truth, this is not being practiced by the witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses altered every command Jesus issued by interpreting these scriptures according to their own ends. In the book of Revelations, we are advised never to add or extract anything from the Word of God. The witnesses are often discovered speaking about it, but in their New World Translation of the Bible, they removed certain texts. For instance, in Acts chapter 8, 37, it clearly indicates that Jesus is the Son of God, but it has been removed from their version of the Bible. Their excuse is that theological scholars also have omitted the holy name of God, but according to unbiased and thorough research, this is an incorrect assumption on their part. In fact, recently they have omitted the words from the second baptismal question, and they no longer consider Spirit-guided. One wonders if their organization is actually representing Babylon the Great, which they bitterly oppose. Remember what Jesus said? Only through me. He did not say, through the JW org can you come to the Father. You may also appreciate this following discovery on my part. I find it quite amusing to note that Jehovah's Witnesses immediately annul their vows as soon as they answer the supposed spiritual questions, before or after their baptism through immersion in water. As I indicated earlier, they have been repeating that the so-called faithful slave, their governing body, is not inspired, and most importantly, fallible. Taking this into account, one needs to consider also one of those 2013 Watchtower articles, which specifically indicates that Jehovah's Witnesses are usually being asked if they recognized that God's organization is directed by the Spirit of God, and as soon as they answer it in the affirmative, they deny the supposed reality of it as their governing body is not inspired. Remember, the root word for inspired is spirit. Therefore, it actually annuls the baptism they are conducting. This is why they so cleverly removed the two words from the second question they have been asking for decades. There are a number of issues the witnesses avoid talking about or responding to. This may be due to not being knowledgeable or only following an ignorant leader, or feeling embarrassed about making Jesus appear untruthful. In John chapter 2, verses 18 to 22, Jesus speaks of his body being the temple, which would be raised from the dead. Yet the witnesses I debated this issue with believe that Jesus literally manufactured bodies, so making the actual resurrection appear untrue and fictional. I also believe that they are not aware of it in general. The witnesses remain stuck in the groove, for they have no answers and never listen to anybody or anything unless proceeding from their governing body. If you encounter the witnesses, you are very likely to discover they always remain distant in their responses, but love to talk to you about their one-dimensional approach, while trying to appear extraordinarily sophisticated. All they want of you is your surrender, dedication, and sacrifice to their organization.